About 50 years ago, there was a song with the line, "Don't know much about history." If that was true then, how much more true is it today? We live in a time, in fact, when the history books have been rewritten and God has been erased. Especially you see that in American history. But at Providence Forum, we're dedicated to teaching Americans, whoever will listen, about the rich Christian heritage we have as a nation. So we've made a series of films that tells the history of the nation without censoring the God part. We're grateful to have guests like Dennis Prager, Eric Metaxas, Oz Guinness, or Peter Lillback, the founding president of Providence Forum, and others. Here's a portion of our film in that series, The Road to Independence.
Eventually, the war would be fought in places like Bunker Hill in Massachusetts. That battle was a Pyrrhic victory for the British. A few more victories like that, and they would have no more soldiers to wage war. As it is, they hired many German mercenaries, Hessians. Battles were fought in New York City, where the harbor was filled with so many British ships it looked like a forest, and in places like Princeton, New Jersey, and in Philadelphia, and in the South, including in Charleston and the marshes of South Carolina, where the British had trouble keeping up with Francis Marion, the so-called swamp fox. Many Americans died. Many British soldiers died, as well as the German mercenaries, Hessians, whom they had hired to execute the war. More Americans died in cruel British prisons, usually on board ships in harbor, than died in battle. On October 8, 1775, all 13 colonies rejected the Regulating Act, which effectively nullified the charter by which the Puritans had created the colony of Massachusetts. This motion passed, but the vote was not unanimous. Historian George Bancroft notes the effect of this vote on the king. This is the vote which hardened George III to listen to no terms.
Though America were to be drenched in blood and its town reduced to ashes, King George III was resolved to coerce the 13 colonies into submission. George Bancroft.
Many British leaders were against the Americans, such as the Earl of Sandwich, who declared in 1775, "The Americans will soon grow weary, and Great Britain will subject them by her arms." Or the Duke of Richmond, who declared during a debate at the House of Lords, "I wish from the bottom of my heart that the Americans may resist and get the better of the forces sent against them." But other leaders in England disagreed, such as William Pitt the Elder, also known as Lord Chatham, who warned, "We shall be forced ultimately to retract. Let us retract while we can, not when we must." Meanwhile, loyalists in America had nothing but contempt for the ragtag army that dared to take on the strongest army and navy in the world.
On these bustling preparations of men who had no artillery, few muskets with bayonets, and no treasury, the Loyalists looked with derision, never doubting the power of Great Britain to crush every movement of insurrection. George Bancroft.
But in the New England colonies and among many Americans elsewhere, there was a resolve to stand up for their God-given rights. As one Bostonian put it, resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual.
The eyes of all Christendom are now upon us, and our honor as a people is become a matter of utmost consequence. If we tamely give up our rights in this contest, a century to come will not restore us in the opinion of the world. We shall be stamped with the character of dastards, poltroons, and fools, and be despised and trampled upon, not by this haughty, insolent nation only, but by all mankind. Present inconveniences are therefore to be borne with fortitude, and better times expected. Ben Franklin.
Meanwhile, George Washington believed that war should not be entered lightly, only as the last resort. But nor was he willing to back down in such a just cause.
That no man should scruple or hesitate a moment to use arms in defense of so valuable a blessing as freedom, on which all the good and evil of life depends, is clearly my opinion. Yet arms should be the last resource. George Washington.
The most momentous achievement of the Second Continental Congress, which also met in Philadelphia, as did all of them, was the appointment of George Washington, because of his military experience, as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the fledgling nation.
This appointment will have a great effect in cementing the union of these colonies. The general is one of the most important characters of the world. Upon him depend the liberties of America. John Adams.
I hope my undertaking this service is designed to answer some good purpose. I rely confidently on that Providence which has heretofore preserved and been bountiful to me. George Washington.
Washington said he was overwhelmed with this duty, and only with God's help could he succeed.
In 1776, Americans declared independence from Great Britain, while at the same time declaring dependence upon Almighty God for His help. They were making, as one of their flags said, showing a pine tree pointing up to where God dwells, an appeal to heaven. The American troops were essentially a ragtag assembly of farmers and merchants. They were militarily ill-prepared to go up against the strongest army and navy in the world at that time. The selection of George Washington to lead them was a stroke of genius, but he himself acknowledged over and over that it was only through the help of God that he and the army he led were able to succeed, so that this nation might become one nation under God. For Providence Forum, I'm Dr. Jerry Newcombe.